Good Sunday morning, everybody. It is one of the tougher calls that parents of young children have to make, finding the right child care. And once you do, how do you really know if your child will be properly cared for? In Kansas, that's what Senate Bill 447 was all about. Lexi's Law, named for 13-month-old Lexi Engelman, who died 6 years ago at a home child care. If approved, 447 would strengthen state regulations on those home child care facilities. And behind it all from the start, Kansas State Senator Julia Lynn, Republican of Olathe. It's good to have you here.
Great to be here, Chris.
Bill having passed the Senate, stalled in the House. How come?
Well, I think that there are some representatives that think that Lexi's Law might be a little bit too onerous, that there might be some concern about government stepping into an area where we don't really have any business being in. And I think that there was a lot of misinformation about the legislation itself when it first rolled out, and so it's caused some concern.
The National Association of Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies ranks Kansas near the bottom in the nation for its child care oversight and regulation. Between 2007 and August of last year, 22 children died in child care situations in the state of Kansas.
Yes, and that is obviously alarming. And it was particularly alarming to me because 2 of those deaths occurred in Johnson County. One was in a licensed daycare home. The other one was in a registered home.
All right, a measure that would do away with the system for registered home daycares and instead require that all daycares in the state be licensed. The difference between registered and licensed would be what?
Well, a licensed daycare facility would require an inspection.
Daycares in the state be licensed. The difference between registered and licensed would be what?
Well, a licensed daycare facility would require an inspection. And registered daycares are simply, you pay a $5 fee, you fill out some paperwork, you send it in, and it really doesn't require any kind of inspection.
And it would also require daycare providers to not only be able to hear but see a child at all times while the child is in their care.
Yes.
And for a home child care situation where you're not dealing with, you may only be dealing with one adult, maybe 2, but I think for the most part maybe 1. How difficult does that become to achieve?
Well, I think it depends on how their home is situated. And one of the reasons the supervision language is in Lexi's Law is to protect those innocent children who might be on another level within the home, out of sight of the provider and also out of sound of the provider. So we felt that it was important to include supervision language that would include sight and sound, and to have those kids, whether they're napping or not, be checked on every 15 minutes. To me, it's a very reasonable level of supervision that any good provider would already be doing, but unfortunately, we have to legislate what the definition of supervision is in a reasonable definition.
Still, there are people even in your own party, your colleague, Senator Mary Pilcher Cook from Shawnee, who said she was concerned the measure would, quote, destroy the self-reliance of families and force them to become reliant on government assistance. To somebody like her, you say what?
Well, I say, Mary, I appreciate your concerns. And Lexi's Law does nothing to break down any free markets that are already in place in Kansas. All it does is to simply provide an inspection for the safety of the children and for the parents. And it also provides a level of consumer protection.
And concerns about government involvement in something like this, is that essentially at the heart of the opposition, at least in the House?
Yes, and my response is we have our homes inspected, we have food inspected, restaurants, cars, commercial buildings, many things that are inspected by the state. And those inspections mean something. And when we're dealing with children, when those homes are not inspected, then we're leaving a lot to chance. And unfortunately, 2 of the families in my district had to suffer the consequence of not having a home inspected like they should be.
When the legislature comes back later this year, what do you think the chances are that this bill will reach the floor of the House?
Well, of course, it passed in the Senate after about 3 hours of debate. It came back to the Senate, another hour and a half of debate. It's now over in the House. I believe it will, if it gets to the floor, it will get a lot of debate. We are busy working now with our representatives to let them know what is really in this law and to clear up some of the misunderstanding and the misinformation that was out there originally with it so that they'll feel secure with their vote.
What do you think the biggest misunderstanding, as you put it, is?
The 15-minute rule for sight and sound. A lot of people think that that might be a little bit too onerous.
And I want to back up for just a moment. That requires these home child care providers to actually see a child in their care every 15 minutes.
Yes, and to hear them. Because that's exactly the problem that happened with both of my families, that they experienced the death of their child because they were not being properly supervised.
And the misunderstanding regarding that is what?
That they think it's too onerous. And it's not, in our opinion.
So it's a matter of, there's just a basic difference of opinion.
It's a philosophical difference, I think. Whether the state should legislate language as specific as supervision language, or whether that should just be something that could be put in rules and regulations through KDHE. We believe that the severity, the fact that we lost 22 kids